Welcome to City and State TV. I'm Executive Editor Michael Johnson. University at Albany's Rockefeller College of Public Affairs and Policy is one of the preeminent schools of government in New York State, and I'm joined today by the Interim Dean, Karl Rethemeyer. Thank you for joining us. I wanted to talk to you about a bunch of different topics, but first let's talk about why you're the Interim Dean. You're the previous dean, David Russo, stepped down briefly to start this College of Emergency Preparedness that the Governor Cuomo actually asked him to do. Tell us a little bit about that project.
Sure. So the College of Emergency Preparedness, Homeland Security and Cybersecurity is the new college that the governor proposed in the State of the State back in January. And it's really an outgrowth of a set of projects that are happening both in the Rockefeller College, which I'm now the interim dean of, but also other units within the University at Albany, including the School of Public Health, our Atmospheric Sciences group. And it's really about preparing a new generation of emergency preparedness professionals that can deal with things like Sandy or a major terrorist attack, or to think about how cybersecurity could be better coordinated between state, federal, local, and especially the private sector. And it's really, we're working to realize Governor Cuomo's vision here that's been articulated in an interest in these three disciplines. And so the president of the University at Albany, Robert Jones, decided that the best way to get started is to have David move over as the founding dean of the new college. And I moved from associate dean up to acting dean within the Rockefeller College. But there's really close ties between the two units. We've been involved in Homeland Security and cybersecurity research for more than 10 years. So we're going to be an important part of the set of programs that are coming there. And we already started, actually. The governor challenged us to make sure that we started by the 1st of September, and we did that. We have a new minor that's up. We have a major that's available now in Homeland Security. Will be available in the fall of next year, and we have a new certificate in that area, which really grow out of the Rockefeller College. And just to say a little bit about the Rockefeller College, we've been around since 1947. I think a lot of people don't realize that. We've been preparing people to be professionals in public service writ large. So we're preparing people that are not only going into state and local service, but also into national service, into nonprofits. And we also place a lot of people in the private sector who are working with government or working with nonprofits to help provide services. We're especially interested in things like collaborative governance and how to think about how state, local, federal government can work with nonprofits and for-profits to provide services. We have a number of nationally ranked programs. Very proud of the fact that we've been ranked in the top 20 for almost a generation. And we have 4 programs in that area that are nationally ranked in public management, in policy analytic methods, in public financial management, and also in our work that we do in health policy. So very proud of the programs that we have, but we also then can contribute into other areas like this new college or work that's happening in digital forensics and other places that are going to be part of the new college as well.
And the Rockefeller College is part of the University at Albany, which just recently partnered with Albany Law School. Tell us a little bit about that new partnership and how that might enhance the experience for students at Rockefeller College.
Sure. So we've had a long-standing partnership with the Albany Law School through things like 3+3 programs where students can come and finish both an undergraduate degree and the law degree and count some of the courses on both sides. We've had in our Masters of Public Administration, which is the flagship degree inside of the Rockefeller College, a joint program where you can get a JD and an MPA and count courses toward both of those. What the affiliation will allow us to do is to have a deeper institutional partnership so that there'll be more opportunities for UAlbany students to go to Albany Law. So many of the things that we talk about in Rockefeller, but also in the new college as well, really touch on the law. Everything from privacy concerns with respect to Homeland Security to thinking about how changes in law affect things like the provision of home health care services, things that you might not think of as having a legal dimension really do and are important in the ways that we think about administering health, administering changes in the way that we think about cybersecurity. So we're going to be able to have our students take courses at the law school. The law school students will then have access to the broad range of analytic methods that we do to bring to the legal analysis that they'll be learning about. They'll also have options to come to us to study other ways to approach knowing about and thinking about the law and public policy problems. So we're very excited about the new opportunities that will come out of this partnership. And it's going to be building on something that we already have a nice foundation between Albany Law and the Rockefeller College.
I know that you also have a Master of International Affairs program that just launched. Tell us a little bit about what that program is and why is it different than all of the other international affairs programs that are kind of available to people throughout the country?
Sure. So again, this was a program that grew out of the NY SUNY 2020 Challenge. Yeah. So Governor Cuomo and the legislature provided a pool of funding that was available for competitive reinvestment in new programs. So we were very fortunate internally to win a very major award to set up this program. It was approved in June, and we're beginning to set this up, and it's really trying to realize some of the ideas that SUNY has been talking about more in a more international experience at SUNY, but also allowing us to partner with other institutions within the system. So we're going to be working with the SUNY Global Center here in New York City. But it's allowed us to hire faculty and to set up a professional master's degree that builds on the things that we do in our MPA, where we're going to be teaching students about management, about finance, about analytics, but in the context of theory and thought that go into things like international trade, international development, the ability to work within major NGOs and in places like the UN or other major international organizations. So I think there are several exciting things about this program. The first is that it's multi-location. So you'll be able to take courses in Albany, in New York City. You'll also be able to take courses online. And we have a very strong tradition of experiential learning within the college. So everyone will be completing at least 480 hours of internship. And that could be in Albany, in New York City, in Washington, abroad. And we've really built a very successful model. Almost every one of our MPA students gets a job almost immediately when they complete. And we're going to be able to take that experience and our really high quality career services and move people directly into employment from the MIA. The other thing is that we're going to be focusing on some areas that I think are a little less focused on in other programs. So we're going to be taking our expertise and the expertise in the new College of Emergency Preparedness and be thinking about global security both as an international component but also as a Homeland Security component. So you'll be able to take classes that'll help you think about how those two pieces tie together with each other. And the second is a real focus on international NGOs and providing people both with the experience of living and working in New York City and working for major NGOs that are located here and getting that experience, but also putting with that a set of really high quality experts on nonprofit management that will be able to think about both the international dimension and the financial and the management dimensions that are really key to thinking about how you can operate in multiple countries and especially in countries that are in the process of development.
Interesting. That's interesting. You mentioned the work and the crossover work onto security and Homeland Security, cybersecurity, those types of things. I know you have a long, distinguished career in that stuff. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what the school's doing. The Rockefeller College has this study of terrorism and responses to terrorism called START. Tell us a little bit about that program and this, what you've been seeing. This was, I think, a $1 million grant you guys got a couple years back. How's that been progressing?
Sure. We've spent almost 10 years collecting information on terrorist organizations and terrorist networks, even before this grant. And it's one of the sort of dirty secrets about research in this area is that while we know a lot about the events that have happened, we know far less about the organizations that actually perpetrate them. So my collaborator, Victor Saul, in the political science department at Rockefeller College and I have been working to build up a data set that would allow us over long periods of time to see how terrorist organizations build, change, work with one another. So we track nearly 1,000 terrorist organizations over the period 1998 to 2014, and can then analyze statistically what they do, why they do it, and try to better understand what are the things that help to predict what they'll do in the future. So we study everything from why terrorist organizations are lethal, why do they attack American interests both in the US and abroad, why do they seek weapons of mass destruction, and our dimension of that's a little different than most other people's is that we're also very interested in networks. So we're interested in how these organizations collaborate and work with one another and how that affects what they do. And what we've actually discovered is that both organizations that ally, but also organizations that have a lot of rivals, they are much more lethal and much more likely to pursue weapons of mass destruction. So one of the things that we tell people in government is pay really close attention to who works with whom, because it's a force multiplier.
Gotcha, okay.
It tells you a lot about what organizations are going to be capable and what organizations may seek to do bad things, because in the process of reaching out, they're gathering information and resources that let them do things that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do on their own.
Yeah, the organizational aspect is fascinating to me, because obviously we hear a lot now about what's happening with ISIS. It's like the big topic in the presidential election. Also on Capitol Hill, everyone's talking about how best to approach this. Obviously with Vladimir Putin in town today, in town this week with the UN meeting, there's a lot of talk about this stuff too. It seems to me, and I guess the narrative that plays out in the press, is that this is a modern terrorist group that's organizing in a different way, that's using social media in a different way. Is that something that you see as well, or is this kind of like an overblown media narrative?
No, I think this is a different organization in much the way that Al-Qaeda in the 90s was a very different organization. But it also has long roots. ISIS is not something that came up in the last 3 or 4 years. It goes all the way back actually to the 90s and had several different incarnations. Tawhid and Jihad that became Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which eventually became ISIS these days. It's different, though, insofar as that it has more professionals working inside of it than most of the other organizations, even Al-Qaeda, because they were able to recruit a number of the former generals from Saddam Hussein's regime to come in. So not only do they have an ideological component, but they also have an operational component that is far more sophisticated than even what Al-Qaeda was able to put together. Second thing is they have a difference in their ideology. Al-Qaeda was very focused on what they thought of as the outward enemy, the United States, Western culture. ISIS is very interested in what they think of as the internal enemy, which is very much focused on actually what they think of as the heretical Islamist within broader worldwide Islam. And so you see a lot of their attacks not only focusing on Western targets, but also targeting Shiites, because Shiites are not considered to be proper Muslims or as devout.
For them, yeah.
So they're a different animal than what we've seen in the past, both in terms of their motivation, but also in terms of their capability. And the fact that they can hold territory means they fund themselves in a much more reliable way than has been true of almost any other terrorist organization. So they are to some extent sui generis in the way that Al-Qaeda was sui generis in the 90s.
Interesting. We'll leave this topic for now. There's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. Was you recently moderated a panel that was inspired by a book called "Our Kids: The American Dream in Crisis," which basically talked about how there's a lot of factors that are hurting upward mobility for youth as they come up, and this gets back to this main point, is that they might not be able to reach the American dream. Tell us a little bit about how that panel went and what the takeaway was from that panel.
Sure. So the panel was focused on a book by Robert Putnam, who is very well known for his work on social capital and civic engagement. But he really was doing a study that is somewhat of a valedictory, but a valedictory in sort of the way that Eisenhower talked about the military-industrial complex as a warning about where things seem to be going in the United States with respect to social mobility and actually the possibilities of our children going forward. And he really sees a class-based society emerging, where those people who grow up and have parents that have a college education have a wealth of opportunities that people that have parents who don't have that kind of education can't even really imagine. And so a lot of the discussion focused around why did that happen? And he talks a lot about the influence of sense of community, which really comes out of his social capital work, and the fact that in the past it was very common for a wealthy person or a middle-income person to be providing a helping hand up to people who are further down. But there was much more mixing geographically speaking. So you would go to school with people who were not from your social class, as well as people that were probably even more wealthy than you were. And now we have such division in the United States geographically that just doesn't happen very often. There was some discussion about the role of schools in that, and Putnam actually provides interesting evidence that while we think about schools as being a driver of these differences in outcomes, most of it actually seems to come back to where you started with respect to your parents.
Gotcha, okay.
Schools are places where this gets expressed, but not where it gets amplified. So then the discussion goes to how to change things, and I think one of the weaknesses of the book, and one of the weaknesses that was discussed, is it's really hard to figure out how you make a serious dent in these very large macro social trends. Some of it comes back to thinking about how do we restore a sense, as Putnam talked about, that we're all in this together, and that the failures of kids from the bottom end of the scale will come back and affect us broadly, socially. So how do we get involved with groups of people who are far more disadvantaged than most of us would be? And how to think about sort of discontinuous social change in the way that's happened in several cases across, say, the last 150 years, and whether that's thinking about things like national service, thinking about changes in the way that we have students engage in early childhood education. There are a number of different levers, but none of them seem to be quite as large as the big macro social trends that Putnam talks about. So I think trying to find those ways of making change are still something that we're working on from a research perspective.
That's interesting, and it's interesting because that obviously makes me immediately think of the universal pre-K initiative that de Blasio is pushing in this overall idea or concept of trying to bridge that gap of social class to some level in the city, and obviously we see that around the country as well. Interim Dean of the Rockefeller College for Public Affairs and Policy, Karl Rethemeyer, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.